Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're here to talk about Myth 2 Soul Blighters gameplay and story, Bungie's ambitious sequel to Myth the Fallen Lords. But first, I want to thank all of our new subscribers, and ask you to consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Please do. Myth 2 was greenlit almost immediately after the first game proved to be a financial success for Bungie. The developers had a back catalog of ideas that they didn't have time to implement in the original game, which they hoped to see realized. The sequel was given a host of quality of life improvements and new features. Enemy variety was essentially doubled, and a couple of new units were added for the player to use. Additionally, the mission design and variety is greatly improved. The art style of the game itself remains largely the same, but this time around the cutscenes were produced by a Japanese animation company, and their art style feels reminiscent of most animation from the region. Myth 2 takes place 60 years since the events of the first game. In the time since the war, Madrigal has been rebuilt, and the sorcerer Ulrich, who played a pivotal role in defeating Balor, has assumed the role of king. In the aftermath of the first game, Soul Blighter had escaped into the wilderness to bide his time, hoping to achieve what his former master could not. Soul Blighter has seemingly claimed the mantle of the Leveler for himself, ignoring everything we know about the prophecy of the Leveler. The Fallen Lords Shiver and the Deceiver are also still alive, their power evidently not weakened after the defeat of Balor, despite it being foretold that it would when the Leveler was killed, implying that either Balor successfully deceived the Fallen Lords, ensuring that they had no incentive to betray him, or in some shape or form Balor still lives. As the game begins, we are following armies of the light, operating around villages just to the north of the Forest Heart, heading towards the small town of Willow Creek. Reports have begun to spread of grave robbing in the region, which the forces of light intend to investigate, but smoke rising in the direction of Willow Creek changes their priorities. The soldiers arrive to discover the town overrun by the undead. The soldiers successfully repel the undead. In the morning, one of the surviving village leaders named Rourke informs us that he has vital information about the grave robbings that he wishes to share with the mayor of Taro, a nearby town. And so the bulk of the Light's forces head to Taro, leaving behind only a small legion of troops to defend the town. When they arrive, Rourke informs the mayor that he had overheard one of the men talking about transporting corpses to a castle near the town of Braille, and of wagons full of bodies being transported to the town from surrounding villages. The forces of Light prepare to assault the fortress, and put a stop to Baron Kildare, the master of the keep. The Legion sets up camp just outside the keep, planning to attack early the next day, but watch as an army of enemy thralls flood out the gates to head south, directly towards the town of Taro, and a messenger is sent to warn them. A dwarf by the name of Yari was appointed to be a pathfinder to find a way to infiltrate the keep to lower the drawbridge for the rest of the warriors to enter through the front gate. Apparently the Baron has a host of guard servants bound against their will by enchantment. One of these guards was awakened from the enchantment and informed the Legion that the Baron had constructed several secret passages to quickly escape in the event of an attempt on his life. The Legion must prevent Baron from escaping through these passages, and either kill him themselves or flush him out to allow the army waiting outside to eliminate him. With the Baron killed, the Legion prepare to head north to the town of Gonin. However, before they depart, the messenger returns, and informs the group that Taro and all the villages in town along the northern border of the Forest Heart had been destroyed by the legions of the undead, which were now heading their way to recapture the keep. The commander orders dwarves to head to Gonin's bridge ahead of the main army to fill it full of satchel charges to destroy the bridge behind them once their army has crossed.
Casualty.
2 days later, on the plains of Scales, Kruniak dies to wounds inflicted by Soul Blighter. The remnant of his soldiers realize that Soul Blighter's return explains recent events, and that the next logical course of action was to reach Madrigal and King Ulrich. But knowing that the walk to Madrigal was too far, the forces of Light instead head west across the Cloud Spine to a world knot destroyed during the events of the first game. The dwarves succeed in repairing the world knot, and King Ulrich convenes with Garrick, one of the leaders of the group we've been following for the first part of the game. Ulrich agrees to send the 7th Legion through the world knot to Scales to hunt to destroy Soul Blighter's army. King Ulrich believes that Soul Blighter is seeking the Summoner, recalling a prophecy from the Total Codex, an ancient tome that contains a record of historical events from the past and prophecies of events that haven't happened yet. The Total Codex foretold that a man would be born who would resurrect the Macridia and visit horrors on the world without equal in history or myth. To refresh your memory, the Macridia were creatures of horrifying capabilities imprisoned and detained by Connacht, the hero of the Wind Age. Ulrich sends a group of the Forces of the Light through the World Knot to the City of Covenant, to the Great Library to retrieve the Total Codex, mirroring a similar mission in the first game. The City of Covenant and the Great Library were destroyed by Balor's forces long before we arrived in the first game, but this time the city and library have been repaired in the years between the two games. The library is surrounded as the forces of darkness flood the city, and we are tasked with fending off their waves as soldiers as we await for our journeyman to retrieve the Total Codex from the library. Once the Total Codex is retrieved, we must flee through the World Knot as the City of Covenant is once more overwhelmed and destroyed. Soul Blighter ransacks dozens of towns and villages, butchering and torturing innocents, hunting for the Summoner. King Ulrich sends the majority of his army to the city of Tandem, conscripting any they find along the way. Meanwhile, Ulrich remains in Madrigal with a handful of men to help evacuate the city. Unfortunately for the Forces of Light, Soul Blighter had successfully found the Summoner, unleashing the Macridia on the world for the first time since their defeat by Connacht. And the Macridia and the Forces of Darkness sack Madrigal once more. The Macridia decimate most of the city's army, and only a small group of soldiers were able to regroup with King Ulrich and fight their way to a ship docked at the nearby port. They successfully flee the city, just as the fallen Lord Shiver arrives. If you might recall, Shiver was defeated by her own Vanity in a dream duel with Rabikin during the events of the first game. Ulrich and the soldiers in his company head to secure the fortress of White Falls. When they arrive, they discover the fortress has been taken up by the Forces of Darkness, and thus plan to storm the fortress to seize it for themselves. The fortress is successfully captured. Ulrich seeks the fallen Lord, the Deceiver. The Deceiver served Balor, but had a series of disputes with the other fallen lords. Ulrich believes that the Deceiver can be turned, so he sends a contingency of forces to retrieve the Deceiver, and they pass through a dark forest called the Ermine, dominated by new enemies called the Bru Unar. The Bru Unar command packs of wolves, wear an animal skull as a helmet, and use a jagged bone weapon. Once through the Ermine, the Legion marched through the Stairs of Grief during a massive snowstorm. The Forces of Light see faint shapes belonging to unknown creatures in the mountains, and prepare traps and ambush sites throughout the mountains to prepare to hold off Soul Blighter's hordes. The Legion are sworn by waves of maulers, strange pig-like enemies with massive clubs. The waves of enemies are lured to various choke points defended by traps and high points, giving your archers the high ground. After the enemies are repelled, they head north to a glacier along the Cloud Spine. The area is surrounded by packs of maulers and aggressive, powerful warlocks who were powerful allies of the Deceiver. These warlocks are capable of firing balls of energy that explode on impact. By all means, they should be avoided. The Forces of Light attempt to navigate around the warlocks and the approaching hordes serving Soul Blighter to arrive at the Deceiver. And once they arrive, they manage to defrost him. The Deceiver claims to be respected by the Trow, and recalling their battles against the Macridia, claims that he can convince them to join the Forces of Light. The Trow were not convinced that mankind were worthy of their allegiance, but agreed to align with the Forces of Light to fight Soul Blighter for a year, if and only if they are defeated in a game of their devising. The Trow place 6 flags in an arena, and challenge us to control the majority of them for a sufficient amount of time, while Trow and Gull attack us. The allegiance of the Trow, as tentative as it may be, is earned, and the Forces of Light regroup, 2 months after one group separated to look for the Deceiver. In the time since, Shiver has attacked White Falls, and a month-long battle ensued. The 7th Legion flanked her, forcing her to temporarily retreat, but she soon returned with legions of hungry Macridia to sack the fortress, forcing the Army of the Light to retreat. The forces of the light are tasked with capturing the old city of Muthremne, a city almost entirely in ruins, having been sacked by Balor and the Fallen Lords. The city had once been the capital of the Karthbrug Empire, that had been forged by Connacht after the defeat of the last Leveler. Ulrich intends to retrieve the Ibis Crown, the crown traditionally associated with the Emperor, and to reinstate the Empire. The forces of light deploy Trow in a new unit called Dwarven Mortars, which as you may expect can fire ranged mortars that deal explosive area of effect damage in order to lay siege to the city that it might be reclaimed by the forces of the light. Meanwhile, Ulrich and his soldiers are hunting the Ibis Crown. King Ulrich believes it had been hidden away in the haunted catacombs beneath the mausoleum of the Karthbrug, where Connacht had stored many precious artifacts. Inside the mausoleum, the forces of light retrieved the Ibis Crown and a magic sword called Balmung. Soon after, a coronation ceremony was held in the ruins of Muthremne to crown King Ulrich as the new emperor of the reborn Karthbrug Empire, and the journeymen who had once served as the royal guard 100 years ago before stripping themselves of their title out of shame when the capital fell, once more bared the title of Heron Guard. An army of Macridia approached Muthremne, forcing the armies of the light to defend the ruins of the city from approaching waves of enemies serving the dark. Fortunately, the city walls are highly defensible and include high towers for our archers and dwarven mortars to take position, and choke points for the Trow, Heron Guard, and soldiers to defend. Although there are several points where the forces of darkness are able to destroy the wall, opening up new paths of attack. After fighting off many waves, the city is successfully defended. Although the Tain was shattered during the events of the first game, Ulrich suspects that Soulblighter had preserved a shard of the Tain, which he and the Summoner used to free the Macridia. For 5 months, the Summoner has resided inside, resurrecting the entire Macridia race slowly but surely, enabling the bloodshed they've unleashed across the world. The forces of light and the Deceiver head to the forest heart to find a different shard, in order to gain access to the Tain to end the Summoner once and for all, and to cut off additional Macridia reinforcements from the Tain's depths. A shard of the Tain is successfully found, and a significant contingency of soldiers in the Deceiver entered the Tain to begin their hunt, fighting through the Tain until they finally arrive at the Summoner's location. The Summoner has the unique ability to spawn in Macridia during combat. Without the right strategy, he can make easy work of our forces, but when appropriately approached, he can be dealt with decisively. After we defeat the Summoner, the Deceiver teleports the forces of the light directly inside of Soulblighter's camp, hoping to catch him off guard in a surprise attack. Instead, the forces of light were surrounded, captured, and imprisoned, and some of their members were tortured for intelligence. The Deceiver was caught in a massive fist, which the journals describe as belonging to an elemental beast. The prisoners overhear that Shiver has successfully routed all of the forces of the light in the far west, and they suspect that Soulblighter is planning an attack on Muthremne. A small group of soldiers successfully break free from captivity and must free the rest of their allies and eventually free the Deceiver. The Deceiver reveals that he has managed to steal a crow from Soulblighter's flock, preventing him from fleeing as he had fled from the Great Devoid at the end of the first game. The forces of light serving the Deceiver come to Leslotho Dam. Meanwhile, downstream, Ulrich and thousands of loyal soldiers had left Muthremne to face Soulblighter, but they were met by Shiver in a valley 2 hours downstream from the dam. The Deceiver leaves all those present behind to defend the dam and heads downstream to warn Emperor Ulrich and to assist him against Shiver. Soon after, waves of the dark assault the dam, intending to destroy it. If they succeed, the water held back by the dam will ravage the lands downstream, destroying Ulrich and his army. After repelling several waves, the dam is successfully defended, and Ulrich manages to push Shiver's army south towards the Silver Mine. The Deceiver desires to face Shiver himself, and Ulrich appoints 5 heroes to accompany him through the ravines in which she lurks. Simultaneously, Ulrich and his forces intend to corner Soulblighter and pin him against the Cloudspine, cutting off all paths for him to escape. The Deceiver and the company under him fight through waves of enemies, until the Deceiver confronts Shiver directly and ostensibly sacrifices himself to destroy her once and for all. Wielding the sword Balmung, Ulrich had proven to be a master of combat against the forces of darkness. The forces of light under Ulrich suffer heavy losses, but Soulblighter's armies have fared far worse.
Is this all you have left of your pitiful army, Ulrich?
It is more than enough.
And Ulrich's forces continue to push Soulblighter towards the Cloud Spine and the volcano Tharsis, which had been used as a forge by the Trowel long before. Ulrich and the surviving remnant of his forces continue to chase Soulblighter, who flees into the volcano Tharsis. Ulrich believes that Soulblighter plans to destroy Tharsis and the Cloud Spine, causing a cataclysmic event that will threaten the entire continent. And so Ulrich leads his loyal soldiers into the volcano, fighting through the last vestiges of Soulblighter's forces, until we finally arrive at the final battleground, a flat plateau overlooking a lava pool at the center of the volcano.
I have killed the whole world!
You are mistaken, Soulblighter. You have only killed yourself.
Soulblighter falls to his death, and Ulrich and his company escape Tharsis as the volcano activates. And with that, the game is over, and all that's left is an epilogue that expands the lore on the cycle and the leveler. With that, we're pretty much at the end of the video, so thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to all the people who have been subscribing lately, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, sharing the video with a friend who you think might enjoy it, or maybe just liking the video, because any of that at all would greatly help the channel out, and I would be very appreciative. Anyway, thank you again, and have a good night.
Each golden age would give way to one of darkness, when foul things would stir beneath the earth.